Hi, it's Freya. Today I'm going to be talking a little bit about other dimensional conversations that are being had with humanity, whether they're actually happening, what it would mean if they were, and what we might be able to, or how we might be able to make use of them if those conversations are actually happening. For a really long time, I really rejected the idea of all channeling. Anybody that said they were a channel, I was just like, no, you're not. You're deluded. And it wasn't until I started to have my own experiences that I really began to realize that there was an awful lot more to it. Now, again, with everything, that doesn't mean to say that there aren't people that seriously do have delusional ideas about what they're experiencing. I'm not really talking about that. I'm talking about major bodies of work that have been channeled, for want of a better word, that have come through either a human being, usually through a human being, that appear to not be coming from that human being's own personality. So the information that's being shared is not something that those human beings themselves would recognize themselves to know from their own experience or to have learnt in their own experience. Often the sort of information that I'm talking about is extremely advanced information, and we're now getting to a point where a lot of this information is really being verified and certainly being questioned by cutting edge science, quantum field theory, quantum physics, and whether or not the scientists that are doing that research are acknowledging this information as possible sources of that, I don't know. I mean, I'm not really that interested in whether that's happening. It's not really my area of interest. But there are certainly, so for example, I'll give you an example. The work of the people I want to talk about today, the work of Dolores Cannon. Dolores Cannon, who was for 50 years an American woman, extraordinary woman who has compiled an incredible body of work. She's now passed, but her body of work involved doing what she described as past life regression therapy, taking people to a level of consciousness in which they appeared to access previous life experiences. Often the information and the experiences that they accessed in those regression therapy sessions seemed to help them to resolve issues which were going on in their present life. Now, that's how Dolores Cannon came to do this. She said herself that she deliberately accessed a level of consciousness that most hypnotherapists avoid because they say strange things happen there. Now, she made that her life's work, actually trying to find out what was going on there. And what she eventually came to appeared to be a very consistent body of information that was coming through people who were in regression sessions all over the world. I mean, this woman actually worked with thousands of different individuals that had never met each other, never had contact with each other, and yet were apparently speaking with a singular voice about the nature of reality, about so what started to happen was lots of people started to talk about stuff that wasn't about their own past life experience, or it was beyond their past life experience. It was a voice which appeared to be saying that it was coming from another dimension, that was speaking through those bodies whilst they were in an altered state of consciousness, and bringing information to humanity that might be of assistance to us and to the individuals involved. But really more, it was a collective message for humanity on how to evolve our consciousness. Now, so Dolores Cannon worked for a good 50 years on this. She created an extraordinary body of work. I've got links down below to some of her very good books on Amazon that you might be interested in reading. Now, the first person that or voice that I want to talk about is Seth. Now, Seth was the name that was taken by what was described as a collective of consciousness from another dimensional reality that wanted again to speak through a human being, to bring information not just to that individual and to the individuals that came to listen to those to its speaking, but to deliver information again about the nature of reality and where we're going in our reality, and particularly how we control our reality with our thoughts and our intentions, which we all now have come to know as the law of attraction, the secret, if you want to call it that. So Seth came through originally through a woman called Jane Roberts. She was an American artist, writer, and she had an experience one day where she was just sitting, waiting for inspiration to write, and she suddenly felt her consciousness or her awareness flying out through the window and becoming part of the leaves of a tree, of actually being conscious of being the tree. Her consciousness then came back into herself, and she began to write and then eventually to speak with a voice that she fully acknowledged and always acknowledged was not her own. And the channeling of Seth, I would say, was one of the foundations of the New Age movement. The information that came through was absolutely extraordinary and very, very sophisticated. And I would say much more sophisticated in many ways than much of what's been channeled since. And I do think that that's partly because we've experienced an educational dumbing down over the last 50 years, and our, if you like, our intellectual capacity in general is less sophisticated than it was 50 years ago. Anyway, Jane Roberts and her partner, he began transcribing what she was speaking. She would go into a trance-like state. She would start speaking. Information would come through that was specific initially for them, for the two of them, to assist them. And then other people started to come and listen to the sessions. She did regular sessions. They recorded and transcribed every single session that occurred. And these are compiled into the books. Seth Speaks. There's quite a few of them. But again, the knowledge that is imparted through them was so advanced. We're now all quite comfortable, and most people are now quite comfortable with the idea that our thoughts and our intentions create our reality. That consciousness is everything that we see around us, that we are creating. I'm sitting here in the woods by the lake. My consciousness is creating the wood, the trees, the leaves, the breeze which is blowing through them, the ripples that are being created on the lake itself, the car I'm sitting in, the technology I'm using to communicate with you. That I am much more than the body that I have been taught that I am. I am far greater, that my consciousness is everything that I'm creating. Now, Jane Roberts' channeling of Seth was one of the most extraordinary kind of overlooked events. It went on for many years. And the level of sophistication in terms of what was being said by Seth, this collective of consciousness beyond our 3/4D reality that we experience ourselves to be in, that they were able to use her voice to communicate information. And I would say that if you read those books, you'll find that it's astonishing how clearly it predicted the path of science, particularly quantum physics, into the nature of reality, the multidimensional nature of reality that we're now only beginning to understand. The third channel that I'd like to describe, talk about in this video is Abraham. Now, sorry, the very beautiful little bird's just flown past. Abraham Hicks. If you haven't listened to Abraham Hicks, listen to it right now. Turn me off and go and listen to Abraham Hicks. Esther Hicks, the channel, the body, the voice, herself, channels through a collective of consciousness that call themselves Abraham. And they specifically talk about the nature of reality and how it responds to our own vibrational frequency, our emotional state, and how our emotional state creates a vibrational magnetism, if you like, to bring to us certain things and experiences, whatever it is we want. So in a nutshell, we intend through contrast. We have life experiences which we call duality. I know that I'm, this is my left hand, this is my right hand. I know that I like coffee more than tea. We have in duality the perfect experience to create contrast. And that contrast exists purely from a human point of view so that we can decide what it is that we want to create. And often we do that by knowing what we don't want. I don't want this, therefore I want that. If we don't realize that knowing what we don't want has to lead to what we do want, and we fixate ourselves on what we don't want, the universe, which is basically a creative energy source, an infinite creative energy source, doesn't know the difference. It really doesn't care whether you're focused on the terrible relationship you've got and how awful it is and how terrible your partner is to you, or whatever it is you've become fixated on, or how awful your job is, or how little money you've got. It doesn't care if you're fixated on that or you're focusing on the opposite of that and focusing on what you do want. It will bring you what you pay attention to. Literally, the law of attraction is that. Whatever it is you're paying attention to, the energy will flow there and it will give you more of it. If you become fixated on how angry you are and how terrible that you are because you're angry all the time, you are basically just going to get angrier and angrier and angrier. It's a fact. It will happen. Anyway, so once you know what it is that you do want, you put that out to the universe, and then you leave the universe to just create that process, to create whatever it is that you want to occur. Your job is not to work out how it's going to happen. It's not to worry about it. It's not to fixate on when it's going to happen or how it's going to happen. Your job is just simply to raise your frequency to come into alignment with it. So you have to be a vibrational match to it. And you do that by just basically doing whatever makes you happy. Don't do stuff that doesn't make you happy, however much you've convinced yourself that you do have to do it, because that's the way life is and life's hard. Let all of that go and just go, right now, this is what I want to do, and it changes everything. So again, this information I'm more interested in. So there is nothing different in what Abraham is channeling through Esther Hicks to really what Seth was saying a few decades previously to that. And none of that information is really any different to what has been spoken of in spiritual teachings for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So we've kind of had a blueprint, and we've had information, we've had, if you like, disembodied voices speaking to us about the nature of reality from somewhere for a very long time. The fact that we can't actually believe this stuff, like I didn't. I mean, I opened this video by saying that I just couldn't actually believe it until I began to understand have a deeper experience and a deeper understanding of the nature of reality and what consciousness really is. I dismissed it. So I dismissed this extraordinary body of sophisticated, helpful work and helpful information, simply because it was outside of my comfort zone. I just couldn't go there. So as a conclusion, what I would say about this stuff is, if you haven't looked at it, have a look at it. It really is extraordinarily interesting. If you're interested in the kind of evolution of humanity, how we happen to be here, why we're here, what we're doing here, Dolores Cannon's work is extraordinarily interesting. It's if you're interested in the nature of reality and how we're creating reality with our emotions and our thoughts, have a look at Abraham Hicks. There's gazillions of videos on YouTube, thankfully. Every single one of them is a gem. And that's one thing that I would say. The information that was channeled through Jane Roberts from Seth, the information that was channeled is still channeled through Esther Hicks by Abraham. You cannot fault it. I'm speaking to you here, I'm making mistakes, I'm umming and ahhing, I'm kind of losing my thread. They are channeling a level of intelligence and a level of consistent information which does not and ah. It does not make mistakes, it does not contradict itself, it does not lose its temper, it does not exhibit normal ego, human, if you like, limitation. And the more I look at it, and the more particular I listen to Esther Hicks channeling Abraham, and when she is channeling Abraham, Abraham will consistently remind the audience that Esther herself, when she is not channeling Abraham Hicks, is still learning how to do this stuff. She's channeling this for decades now, and yet she, in her own being, in her own limited being, is still learning how this information is applicable in her everyday life. She is not Abraham. Jane Roberts was consistently bowled over by the information that came through from Seth. And rightly so. I mean, we're talking 40, 50 years previous to now, half a century ago, when the information that was coming through was really a precursor and predicting where science is today. So this stuff was literally mind-blowing for them. But it's consistent, it's specific, it is non-contradictory. So the question is, one, where's it coming from? And that's something I'm going to talk about in another video. I'm going to talk about Flatland. If you've heard of Flatland, it was a book that was written quite a long time ago now, about a world where there were only two dimensions, and it was called Flatland for obvious reasons. And one day it had a visitor from a third dimension. They had a visitor from a third dimension, and it's about how did they respond to that experience? How did it present itself? What did it make them feel? And in a way, that's what we're really talking about here. We're living in a world that we consistently experience from three dimensions: depth, height, width. Time being the fourth dimension, which we know is relative, and some people say doesn't exist at all. But we now know, it is confirmed that there are many, 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 many more dimensions which we are not, in an everyday scenario, able to access. But what if information or beings, or whatever you want to call it, intelligence, consciousness, that exists in those other dimensions decided that it was going to communicate with us? I would say that the information coming through Abraham, through Esther Hicks, and the information from Seth, those two, I would say without a shadow of a doubt, is information from beyond our current level of consciousness that has been instrumental in shifting our understanding of the nature of our reality, and in doing so, opening up our consciousness to other dimensional experience, other levels of reality. And the people that have consistently been students of this information, it's very, very hard to fault the fact that this information works for them. They are changing the nature of their reality. They are changing the consistency with which they manifest a life that they choose rather than one that randomly seems to be foisted upon them. They're happier, they're wealthier, they're healthier, their relationships are better. You only have to listen to the audience communicating with Esther Hicks to know that paying attention to what this information is saying pays dividends. So first thing I would say is have a look. Don't dismiss it out of hand like I did. You know, there's an awful lot to it. On the second point, what does it say about the nature of conscious evolution, which really is what all of my videos are about on some level? What does it say about the nature of our reality? It says that it's way, way, way more magical and exciting than we've been taught to believe. And that really is fundamentally what I believe. And not just what I believe, it's what I experience. The last 25 years of my life have been an absolutely extraordinary journey into other levels of reality, way before I had any information, way before the internet was able to provide any verification of what I was experiencing. So I would say it's really worth a look. If you know, sometimes it can create a bit of discomfort in us, and the normal reaction to something which is outside our comfort zone is to either mock it or react violently against it, or to be angry with it or irritated by it. So that's fine. If you're not ready for it, you're not ready for it. There's nothing that can be done about that. You'll get there eventually. We'll all get there eventually. But it's worth looking at. These are very, very, very interesting bodies of information which continue to come through. Anyway, I hope you have a look. Until next time, when I'll be talking about Flatland and the nature of reality and other dimensions and are they communicating with us. Have a great day. Enjoy the magic.